What's up? I'm John Middlekauff, the host of the 3 and Out podcast, and you can find it below in the description. Also, you're watching this on the Volumes YouTube channel. I need you to subscribe right now. Share it with your friends. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast, coming to you live from Scottsdale, Arizona. A little hot today, but, you know, they make this thing called air conditioning, and I'm actually freezing cold right now. Beautiful day. It's about 2:30 Pacific Standard Time. I guess we got a Monday night football game going. I realized when I recorded my podcast yesterday, there was a night game on. And then I realized, well, I mean, is anyone really watching these preseason games? And I'll be honest, I kind of did. I mean, maybe part of it was Kyler becomes the offensive coordinator in the fourth quarter. And he actually did a pretty good job. I got to give him some credit. He may not watch film, but he can dial up some plays. I think Greg Olson's actually really good. I was rooting for Harbaugh to lose a game. He never loses any of these preseason games for some reason. I think he's won like 75 straight games. I mean, I think it's 20. I think last night was his 22nd straight preseason game. That's insane. Not that again, I'm watching people I've never heard of, but I did watch Kyler call some plays. Big show today. If you listen on Colin's feed, make sure you subscribe to the 3 and Out podcast, as well as the Middlekauff mailbag. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. I plan on doing one on this show. We'll just see how long we go for. Got a lot of stuff. I wrote down a lot of little things at the end that we can just bang through around the league and some college football stuff as well. I mean, next week, I actually think I'm going to Nashville next weekend. Just have a little fun. Yeah, might as well be in the South when college football kicks off, and I haven't been back in years. Always wanted to go, and so we're going. I want to start with Baker Mayfield for today. And it's official. I saw the Carolina Panthers. I did a take, I think, 2 weeks ago that it was essentially over, that everyone said they were leaning that way. I'm like, you don't need the news to break here. Baker Mayfield's going to win the job. And now he is officially the starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. And makes that game, like, if Baker Mayfield, and I know that Jacoby, who knows, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo, can you imagine if he beats the Cleveland Browns week 1? Be, a pretty cool story. But a lot of guys, let's face it, I would say most human beings can handle when they're the underdog. It's so easy to, fight for everything, scratch and claw, when you're going after something. I think most people are motivated when they don't have something and they want it. At least anyone worth their salt, right? It's easy to be the underdog. It's easy to take some swings. It's easy to not have much to lose. It's hard to be on top. I was watching this Manti Te'o documentary, which, it's a little much. I do believe a lot of what he's saying, but it's like, you were really this naive? But even he admitted his senior year, he started feeling himself. And a lot of people, when they get on top, aren't great at handling success. I watched last week an Elvis Presley documentary. My dad loved Elvis. I mean, loved Elvis. And obviously he was dead way before I was ever alive. Now, I listened to him so much just because my dad liked him, but I don't think I quite comprehended how quickly he died. I mean, the guy died at 42 years old. Now, he was famous for 20 years, but think about Frank Sinatra. That there are a lot of famous musicians that live for a long time and are super famous forever. Elvis's, run was kind of short-lived. And part of it, he just didn't, as he got older, the fame, he got divorced, he just didn't handle it that well. Ate himself and diseases and the pills and just died, And some people handle success very well. I think Manning and Brady are fantastic examples of two guys that have been super famous now for decades and handle it pretty seamlessly. I mean, Peyton's been famous longer than Tom has. Peyton's been famous really since probably he was in high school. Definitely regionally and nationally, he got famous in the mid-90s. And you look at him now, it's easy for him, And I think a lot of guys, struggle with that. And it's human nature, right? To get super big and not handle everything that comes with it, whether you're an athlete, whether you're a musician, whether you're a businessman, whatever. Fame is, and just notoriety, and everyone basically blowing you 24/7. Some people can just whatever. It means nothing to them. A lot of people take it too far, and it ruins them and derails them. And let's face it, with Baker Mayfield, he did not handle success well. He just didn't. He had the 1 year where he was on top with the Browns, the COVID year, and after that, it was a disaster. Now, you can say he was banged up, but his own teammates turned on him in 2021. His head coach turned on him. And then this offseason, he got a dose of humble pie. The Cleveland Browns said, kick rocks. We're signing a guy who, while better than him, had 20-plus women coming after him for sexual assault. And they gave him the biggest deal in the history of the league. So I don't care, even if Baker Mayfield would acknowledge, Deshaun Watson's better than myself if I'm Baker Mayfield. That's still a humbling experience. Anytime anyone tells you, whether it's a boss, a girlfriend, an NFL GM, you're not good enough, it humbles you. I've been fired twice. I mean, it's a blow to the ego. Even if you hate the place, even if you don't necessarily care, we're all humans, we're all competitive, and no one likes to be told they're not good enough. I got to give Baker Mayfield credit because this is about as low as it got for him this offseason. He got traded to Carolina. Let's face it, nobody wanted him. Carolina gave a 5th-round pick and paid, I think they're paying $3.5 million. That was the going rate to get Baker Mayfield. It shows you his value pretty down. And he went into Carolina not knowing the offense with an incumbent guy who had the entire OTAs to get a lead on him. Now, you can say on tape in their career, obviously Baker has been a better player, but still, Sam should have had a big advantage, and Baker lapped him, and lapped him fast. And now Baker Mayfield is a starting quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. I would have said, this notion that, of course Baker's the starter. They traded for him. They traded nothing for him. When you trade a lot for somebody, then of course the guy's the starter. But when you trade a 5th-round pick and pay a guy $3 million, you're going to start whoever the best guy is to win. And Baker clearly is much better than Sam Darnold. But to me, came in there. I read some quotes today from Matt Rule, been very positive about him, had his head on straight, went in there and worked, and won the job. And he's taken a lot of shit. I know I've probably given him a lot. Obviously, the Collins of the world, and just a lot of fans. Most people turned on him, and rightfully so. It was self-inflicted. But sometimes when you just kind of keep your mouth shut, go and work, win a job, that's impressive. So kudos to Baker Mayfield for going to Carolina and becoming the starting quarterback and making Week 1 game, Carolina against Cleveland, extremely interesting. I know this. I'll be paying attention. And I would not have if Sam Darnold was the starting quarterback. I was thinking about this, speaking of the Browns. I don't know if I really talked about it. I didn't watch. I'm so Deshaun Watson'd out. And I saw that the moment the suspension was levied, it came out like James Palmer immediately tweeted Deshaun Watson, we'll be talking to the media in 5 minutes. And I just thought to myself, in what world is this a good idea? And of course, it was a disaster. And then after he talked, the Haslams talked with Andrew Berry, their general manager, in the middle of them. And if you watch it, I didn't watch the whole thing. I just saw clips on social media, like a minute or 2 minute clips of Jimmy Haslam talking about Deshaun Watson. Jimmy Haslam sure talks about Deshaun Watson like he's guilty as hell. Jimmy Haslam does not speak about Deshaun Watson like he believes he's innocent. He kept speaking about Deshaun Watson like everything that happened in the past was bad. Very bizarre. But there's this visual of Andrew Berry when you see these clips of Jimmy just ranting and raving and making the whole situation even worse. No clue why any of them talked. He got suspended. They released a statement. Enough. There's nothing you can do by talking. Nothing you're going to be able to say is going to make it better. And of course it didn't, and it got worse. It was hard not to watch the clips and go, this is a joke. But one thing I consistently saw is Andrew Berry just sitting there, kind of speechless. Because in what world, for a guy that's an Ivy League guy, he knows he can't say anything. There is nothing that can come out of his mouth that will be a positive. So what happened? He didn't say anything. He kept his mouth shut, rightfully so. And I was thinking about it, like, being a GM is, for most of us that know we're not going to go to the NFL or not going to play Division I college football, it's something that you're like, God, I think being a GM would be pretty awesome. I know I kind of got the bug. I'm like, I want to work in scouting. I want to work in the front office. I want to be a guy eventually picking players, doing deals. It's sweet. It's why so many people play fantasy football. And then once you work in the NFL, you realize, well, it's not quite that. And then once you follow the NFL as closely as I do, you start realizing, like, being a GM is not all that you thought that it was cracked up to be. And I kind of broke the NFL down into 3 different categories because I think most people that love sports go, being a GM would be badass. And, like, yeah, maybe for the right team, but if you work with the wrong coach or the wrong owner, it's not. And to me, there are 3 different types of GMs in the NFL. First and foremost, one that's completely run by the owner. Dan Snyder historically has told his GMs who to draft. Literally on the day of the draft. You do all this work and he goes, actually, we're going to take this guy. Right? He's been terrible. The Cowboys don't have a general manager. Why? Because Jerry Jones is the guy picking the players. Now, you could argue that he's done a pretty good job recently. Obviously, when Al Davis was with the Raiders, he had top personnel people. They never had the juice. Al did. And I think you watch Andrew Berry. I'm going to give Andrew Berry the benefit of the doubt. I'm not saying that Andrew Berry wouldn't think that Deshaun Watson's a good player because, of course, anyone that's watched football over the last 6-7 years at Clemson and with the Houston Texans would go, yeah, Deshaun Watson is a good football player. I would want him on my team if I don't have a top 5 or 6 quarterback in the league. We'd all agree there. But this offseason, given the circumstances, we're going to have to trade all this, pay him $230 million, and deal with the fallout of these legal ramifications. I know several GMs. They all said, and I know a couple front offices that were in the quarterback market. They said, yeah, we knew some of this information. We didn't even pursue it. It made us so uneasy. You can't convince me that this was not a 100% Jimmy Haslam-driven deal. It's why when you work for an owner like this, is being a GM even that great of a job? Now, it pays 7 figures. It is a good job where you are an NFL general manager. But in terms of your actual juice, in terms of your actual power, the biggest decision a franchise can ultimately make, you don't even get to make it. You're told, we're doing this. Because you just look at this guy sitting between Jimmy Haslam and his wife. He had the look of, yeah, man, this sucks. This is not what I wanted to do. And then you have the number 2. The general managers that work for the coach, which in this modern day NFL is a large percentage of them. But there's a caveat on this. Brett Veach, let's use him as an example. Obviously, Andy Reid is one of the highest paid coaches in the league, is one of the best coaches in the league, and one of the more powerful coaches in the league. He is the ultimate decision maker in terms of the hierarchy. Now, he would tell you, I lean, just when John Dorsey was there and now with Brett Veach, I lean on them to do the personnel. And he's telling the truth. And when Brett Veach, who well before they even came to Kansas City, has proved his worth being one of Andy's right-hand men in Philly, that Andy really trusts him. And now, since they've been in Kansas City and Brett took over, he really, really trusts him. And they run the personnel department. Now, obviously, Andy, guys he likes, has influence. But if Andy, at this point in time in his career, didn't want something to happen, it's not going to happen. But Brett Veach doesn't just get to pick and choose every single thing, and I think guys like John Lynch would be an example of someone who would fall into this category. Ultimately, Kyle Shanahan is at the top of the food pyramid in San Francisco. But like Veach, John Lynch has a lot of juice. John Lynch has a lot of say. He has a lot of influence over the picks, and hell, he makes a lot of the picks. But if Kyle wants something, it's going to happen. And I would put Pete Carroll and John Schneider kind of in the same thing as like Andy and Veach. John Schneider's making a lot of picks, but ultimately Pete Carroll is above him. Now, John Schneider, kind of like a long time ago with Veach, proved his worth early on to Pete Carroll because Pete Carroll, never forget, would not have drafted Russell Wilson. He convinced them. They took it. Rest is history. And ever since then, Pete has trusted John over the years to make a lot of decisions. And some of them don't work, but a lot of them have. And they've won a lot of games because of John Schneider. So those GMs, which is a pretty good job, right? You are ultimately not the boss, but you have a lot of juice. You work with a good coach. He trusts you to make decisions. But ultimately, they're relying. Mickey Loomis was like this with Sean Payton. Ultimately, if Sean didn't want a guy, they weren't going to draft him. But if you're Sean Payton, you can't micromanage everything. So you do depend on the guy. But I've heard Mickey Loomis, he said this on Dimitroff's pod, ultimately it was Sean Payton's show, as it should be. And then there are the GMs that are really let's face it, in basketball and baseball, all their GMs now run the show. Daryl Morey's, Friedman, Cashman, Farhan Zaidi, those guys get to dictate the terms of the franchise. That is becoming rarer and rarer in the NFL, right? Nick Caserio is a good example in Houston. He has all the juice. He has all the power. Joe Douglas, same thing. Anything that they want to happen will happen. Now, they're not dummies. They know that, if the coach is I'm never going to put this guy, are you going to argue over with position coaches? Maybe not position coaches, but coordinators and head coaches on everything. There is a compromise, just like in any industry. But ultimately, if you want to draft a guy, Nick Caserio or Joe Douglas is drafting that guy. Howie Roseman as well. But the business, you do have to work hand in hand with your head coach. So the quicker that you can trust them to be on the same page as you, the quicker they can be on the same page with your philosophies, the easier and more seamless everything is. But I put guys like Joe Shane now with the Giants, historically has been a GM-run organization. Jason Light, especially now with Arians gone, has all the juice down there. The Packers with Brian Gutekunst. So basically you have the owner telling you everything to do. That's number one. That's the worst category. To me, the best category is probably Brett Veach and John Schneider, Brett Veach and Andy Reid, or John Schneider in all the good years with Pete Carroll, or now John Lynch with Kyle Shanahan. I would even put Sean McVay has gained a lot of juice with the Rams. You want to be working for an elite coach who the owner should go, this guy is the most important guy in my organization beside the quarterback, but that coach gives you a lot of trust, gives you a lot of juice, you make a lot of money, and you get to, impact 98% of the decisions in terms of free agency and definitely the draft. He lets you dictate, but he's the boss and you win. To me, that's the ideal. And then if you can pull it off where you make every single decision and your coach is cool with it, that would be cool too, but that's just pretty rare. We'll see. If Sirianni goes to the playoffs 4 straight years, he would have a lot of juice. Now, I'm not saying he's going to fight with Howie or anything, but the faster you win in the NFL, the more you get paid, and GMs are just never going to make more than coaches. This is not baseball. This is not Daryl Morey in the NBA. This is always going to be football. So, Pittsburgh is a GM-run organization. But Mike Tomlin's won so much, ultimately, if he wants something to happen, it'll probably happen. So I think it's pretty just fascinating in a league where, and just sports in general, is something that a lot of us on the outside are always we want to be a GM, we want to be a GM. They're just not all equal. And last but not least, speaking of a GM, I saw Les Snead, he was talking to Albert Breer in Monday Morning Quarterback. And he talked about their decisions in making trades. And he said that the way that they looked at the Jalen Ramsey trade when they made it, and I'll never forget how he said something either in the offseason or during the draft that really resonated with me. He said this in a press conference, not to me personally, that every team in the league has the same amount of capital, right? Every team in the league has the same salary cap. Every team in the league has the same amount of draft picks. You just get to decide how you want to allocate those resources, how you want to allocate that capital, right? Every team in the league starts with a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a third-round pick. But if you look at the draft, some teams don't have first, second-round picks. Well, you chose to trade those for players. You chose to trade those to move up. Maybe you have multiple second or multiple third-round picks. You chose to trade Russell Wilson to the Broncos. You chose to trade whoever, Jamal Adams, right? And that's how it all kind of balances out. I want to talk about something I saw Les Snead say. the general manager of the Los Angeles Rams and defending Super Bowl champs. He talked to Albert Breer in his MMQB article, and he discussed his philosophical belief on trading and definitely trading a lot of picks for premium players. And he used Jalen Ramsey as an example. And he said the way that he looked at it was when they traded multiple first-round picks for Jalen Ramsey. Remember, the previous year they had lost in the Super Bowl to the New England Patriots. And he said they had the 31st pick. And he looked at the other previous year. So he goes, we basically looked at it like we were trading back-to-back pick 31s. And the previous two pick 31s had been offensive linemen. So he's like, basically the way you could look at it is we traded two offensive linemen for Jalen Ramsey. And I get what he's saying, but I also think he's a little off base here. And I'm pro Jalen Ramsey, and I'm pro making that trade for Jalen Ramsey. I understood it, especially because, Jalen Ramsey, premium position, one of the better corners in the league, and top corners just don't consistently come into the NFL. But here's the thing, and I saw Howie Roseman say this, I think, during the OTAs. Maybe it was during the draft. Not to me personally. He said it in a press conference. And I remember it really resonated with me. He said, every team in the league has the same amount of assets. Every team in the league has the same amount of salary cap space, and every team in the league has the same amount of draft capital. Well, not the Miami Dolphins because they got docked the pick. But you just get to choose how to use it. Now you'd be like, well, not everyone has a first or second round pick. Not everyone has the same. No, I mean that the Niners don't have first round picks because they use them to trade up. Denver's going to have less first round picks because they used him to get Russell Wilson, right? Seattle and the Jets have more picks because they traded players for those picks. So you get to choose how you allocate your resources or your capital, especially your draft capital, and same with your money. I can choose to pay linebackers, linemen, quarterbacks, like whatever. You get to choose how you want to pick and choose your team. But if we start from scratch, every team has the same amount of picks and same amount of salary cap. And the best part about the NFL, unlike baseball, every team has the same amount of money, right? Because of the media rights deals that pays for the salary cap. So in Les Snead's idea, like I get what he's saying, he chose to use 2 first-round picks to go get Jalen Ramsey. That's how he wanted to allocate those first-round picks. Here's the problem, though, is part of when you trade for a player, and Roquan Smith recently waved the white flag. He does not want to be there. I mean, I have pretty good sourcing on that. Roquan Smith over the Bears. Heard from a couple people, Bears' offer wasn't bad. Was very aggressive. He does not want to play there. Don't blame him. I'd want to get out of there. I have a bunch of people that are like, Middlekauff, you never say his name right. It's like, yeah, I can't take Uberflus, and everyone's like, it's Eberflus. Like, when the guy wins 6 games, I'll say his name right. I don't think there's a team in the league that would have hired the guy to be their head coach. So, yeah, it's like I'm not anti-Bears. I'm pro-Bears. I wish they were a good franchise. To me, they kind of feel like a clown show. Roquan Smith, I think, knows this, wants out. But he's kind of stuck. He's not going to be able to go anywhere. And even he, I think, tweeted, this is my last year, and then I'll bet on myself. Roquan, they'll franchise tag you. This is not the NBA or Major League Baseball. This is a front office and team-led league. That's why it's thriving. You're not going to be they're not going to let you walk, And the problem is he plays middle linebacker. Unlike Jalen Ramsey, he's not going to get traded for 2 first-round picks because you trade for Roquan, then I got to pay him. Now, you can be like, I would much rather have Roquan Smith than Jamal Adams, and Jamal Adams went for 2 1s and a 2. I think we all agree it's one of the worst deals in NFL history. It's insane. If Seattle could get a redo, I'll promise you, they'd take a redo. They can't. It's not. There's no have-backs, right? They're stuck. So here's the thing, is that part of having a first-round pick, whether it's the number 2 pick in the draft or it's the 31st pick, is getting a guy on a cost-controlled contract. Because when I have a first-round pick, let's just say it's pick 19, I know the exact contract, and I know how long I'll have the guy for. And when you make a trade for Jalen Ramsey, Khalil Mack, you do then have to trade a lot, and then you have to compensate the player. Now, those two players, for example, are Pro Bowl level guys, high level guys. I don't mind doing it. But what if I can get a Pro Bowl impact level guy with my first round pick? Then I have him on a cost control deal. I have way more salary cap space. Now, where Les Snead it worked out, his last two big trades have been for Super Bowl winning quarterback and a Pro Bowl level corner. But when you're making these trades, it is twofold because I trade for the player and then I have to compensate them. Like the Eagles, for example. The Eagles, they would love a redo on the Jalen Reagor pick. I think that's pretty obvious. If they could do that one over, I got news for you, they would take Justin Jefferson. And if they had taken Justin Jefferson, they would have had a guy on a cost control deal. They wouldn't have had to trade their first round pick and then pay A.J. Brown all that money. But because and listen, we all miss on picks in your fantasy draft or if you're a real NFL general manager. I'm not blaming anybody. It just didn't work out, and they had to double down a couple years later. But when you do that, it's a double whammy because you give up a valued pick and you pay the guy a lot of your salary cap space. So the entire part of the draft process, every team in the league, and you just never know. The draft is the great unknown, right? And you can nail a pick. Like in the late second round, you get DK Metcalf. Even Seattle, if they knew DK Metcalf was going to be DK Metcalf, you know what they would have done? They would have drafted him in the first round, right? The same thing with the Titans and A.J. Brown. You never truly know. But once you have that, you go, God, I'm glad we picked him because now we're getting him for really cheap. And even once you got to extend the guy, like the 49ers or Seattle, they just gave both those two guys extensions. Well, when you look over the totality of the deal, right, those first 3 years were so cheap. So if you amortize it not on the brand new 3 or 4 year deals, but over the life of the 7-8 years you have the player, it's an incredible financial reward for being a good drafting team. So it's part of what makes the league fun, all these different team philosophical beliefs, and the Rams have been really successful. You would think eventually, though, and I've always said this, if they get some injuries at the top, not with just random guys, but with their top 4 or 5 core players, they would be in some trouble. And you would say the last several years, I mean, Aaron Donald, Cooper Kupp, Jalen, like they have been relatively healthy at the top. I wanted to fire around just a bunch of different league stuff. I saw people tweeting about, Kenny Pickett had another good preseason game against backups. But, listen, I'm not a big Kenny Pickett guy, but we'll see. The Steelers, anytime you can go to a team that has an excellent defense and good skill guys, you have a chance, even if you're not the most talented guy. But I'm betting against them. Just don't see the skill set. Could be wrong. Adam Schefter, I think, insinuated on television that, if all Trubisky has to have a little slip up, and then it's Kenny Pickett's time. I would say it's 50-50. No inside information on this, that the Steelers just pull a Mac Jones from last year. Remember, Mac Jones, the backup, until he started week 1. And I think that has to be in play now. That I am prepared for Mike Tomlin to come out, because what's the competitive disadvantage or advantage for the Steelers to announce Kenny Pickett, the quarterback, until they have to? And news could break week 1. I would expect for, if it does happen, that to get announced week 1. And I think that's on the table now. I saw Jordan Love. I didn't watch any of the Packer game. I actually thought in his first preseason game, he made some good plays. Some balls were dropped. He also made some terrible plays. You do see just the physical attributes, the athleticism, the arm strength. I saw LaFleur said he played a lot better in the second preseason game and has been high on him. Listen, anytime you can have a cheap backup quarterback and it's not like he would fetch a high pick, the Packers got to feel better and better if he just improves, because he's not going anywhere, because it doesn't behoove them to trade Jordan Love for like a 4th-round pick. He's actually become, if he plays well at this point in time, more valuable to the Packers than he is around the league. So, listen, you got to take little wins where you can get them when it comes to, backup quarterbacks. If I'm the Packers, it's probably turned into somewhat of a positive. I think the Raiders and the Patriots must be, I haven't checked the preseason schedule for week 3, but Belichick is at the Raiders facility, meaning the Patriots are, and was just speaking how awesome it is. So I would have guessed that they're going to do some joint practice this week. Belichick, no coach in the league, loves joint practices, quite like Bill Belichick. And Bill Belichick said that Al Davis would be on his football Mount Rushmore. I don't know if his football Mount Rushmore. He just said he should be a football Mount Rushmore guy. And I was thinking, like, what would my football Mount Rushmore be non-player? I thought it was pretty easy, actually. I think Vince Lombardi has to go on it. I think Bill Walsh has to go on it. I would also throw Al Davis on there just because I wouldn't throw owners on there, but he's a unique owner. He was the general manager. And if you talk to people close to the Raiders, he also acted as the pseudo defensive coordinator for a large percentage of the operation. I think he has 7 or 8 introductions at the Hall of Fame. Why? Because the players know that he personally selected them. And a lot of the defensive guys which he coached know that he personally implemented the scheme. So I would have Lombardi, Walsh, Al Davis. Then I think for 4 it gets kind of interesting. I wouldn't call myself a football historian, but I'm not dumb enough to know that Paul Brown would be in the mix. I think you could easily put Bill Belichick as the 4th guy. And the other guy that I would have in the mix for the 4th overall, the reason that the NFL is on top and dominates now as a league is a $10 billion a year. I love when, and Colin talks about this a lot, how attendance is down in the NFL and college football. And my response always is, who gives a shit? This isn't Major League Baseball. I don't need butts in the seats. That's just extra free money for the owner. The league is a television product. It's a television show. And the most important person in the history of NFL television is John Madden. Changed the game. And if you factor in the video game too, his importance to the popularity of football, I do think you could throw John Madden on there. Now, I'd probably put Belichick above John Madden and probably Paul Brown as well. But I do think that John Madden would have to be in the discussion when it came to football non-players, Mount Rushmore. I saw Kayvon sprained his MCL. A lot of arguing on the internet streets, like, you can't cut him. Yeah, the guy went low. Like, part of being a defensive lineman is learning to play cut blocks. I do not think the play was dirty. Is it ideal in a preseason game? Of course not. I do think it looked like he slipped a little bit. But then I saw my guy Jeff Schwartz on Twitter earlier today. There was a play where a defensive lineman tackled a running back really low. Like, it's football. You know, part of anyone who has been to a Division I practice and definitely an NFL practice knows that linebackers and defensive linemen do drills to play off cut blocks. Now, he's a rookie. I'm not promoting this type blocking. I don't want to see guys get injured, but I by no means views that as a dirty play. It's football. It's a football play. And you got to use your hands and get around that, not take on the blocker when he's going that low. The Giants lost a guy to a torn ACL. And I was thinking about this today. If you put the Giants, like the Denver Broncos just went on the open market. In Denver, which is obviously not New York. Great football market, and Denver's an awesome franchise, the stadium, the brand, it's big. Well, what if they went for $4.65 billion, what would the New York Jets go for? And that's the number 2 team in New York. What would the New York Giants go for? Let's just say the Jets would go for 6 or 7 and the Giants would go for 8. We're talking about 2 franchises probably in the vicinity of $13, $14, $15 billion combined. Now, if the Cowboys would probably go for 10, who would be the next mix of teams that would go 8 to 10? The Giants would be one of them. The Giants, the Bears, the 49ers, probably the Rams now that they're in LA. Enormous markets with enormous brands. It's pretty clear to know the Packers and the Steelers would be interesting because their brands are so big, but their markets, they would go for a lot, don't get me wrong. But my point is that these 2 teams, regardless of what all the other teams would go for, their value is enormous. These two owners, the Maras and obviously Woody Johnson, are filthy rich. Yet the turf in that stadium, some high schools would not allow their teams to play on that turf. Some high schools, if you put that turf on their stadium, would rip it up immediately and put better turf. It is a fucking embarrassment that those two teams allow that turf to be on that field. I remember 2 years ago, the 49ers, they played the Giants and Jets back-to-back. I can't remember if it was against the Jets or the Giants. It was obviously against one of the teams. They played them week 2 and then week 3. There was a sequence in 3 plays. Nick Bosa ripped up his knee. 2 plays later, Solomon Thomas ripped up his knee. You watch people play on that field, they go down all the time. Now, I'm not someone that be like, you have to have grass, you can't have field turf. I would always lean grass, but clearly some turf is pretty good. I don't pretend to be some guy that knows the difference levels of the turf, but I've heard enough and talked to enough people, there are different levels of turf. That turf is unacceptable. They have to get better turf. It's a joke. Bill Parcells' birthday, just what an incredible, incredible coach. 4 teams to the postseason. Obviously, multiple-time Super Bowl Hall of Famer. Just a legend. Couple quick college football things. Fraud Meyer, as I like to call him, has been rehired by Fox Sports 1 to go on to their big noon kickoff. Listen, he didn't last a season in the NFL. Freddie Kitchens did as a head coach. Jim Tom Sula did as a head coach. We have seen some of the most embarrassing head coaches ever last a season. Urban got laughed out of the room. Literally an all-time embarrassment. But he does know college football, and he's clearly pretty good on TV. Now, would I rehire him? I don't really care. To me, it's more about, is this guy that big of an egomaniac? You're really going back to TV after you were laughed out of a building? You're worth stupid amount of money. I think it's actually more of a reflection. TV, they're just in it to get the most eyeballs, be a big deal. They don't give a shit. I mean, they're about making money. To me, Urban, did this not make you reevaluate some things? Clearly not. I understand why they hired him. I actually kind of like the show because I like Leinart. I like Brady Quinn. But I don't know, man. I think it's much more of a reflection on Urban Meyer than it is Fox. All these networks, they don't care. They're in it for the content. Steve Sarkisian announced that Ewers, I didn't write down his first name. He's obviously that huge recruit that was from Texas, that graduated early, that went to Ohio State, and then he transferred to Texas. I think Sark bought himself a little time the moment he landed not Eli Manning or Peyton Manning, but Cooper Manning's son, Arch. I do think this is a big year for him. Last year, he went 5-7. Say that out loud. 5-7. And now he's going with a quarterback that hasn't played much, obviously, at all. Obviously, he's really talented. He's got a huge arm from everything that I've read and clips I've seen. But, to me, 6-6, can they go 8-4? Can they go 8-4? And everyone tells me, well, their team's a lot better. They got the number 1 running back in the country. I don't have that much faith in Sark. I do think it's pretty nuts that Alabama, who Nick Saban said last year was a rebuilding season. Think about that. He had a rebuilding season where he beat Georgia in the SEC championship game and lost a pretty damn close game in the national championship without his 2 best wide receivers. They had 4 guys on the AP All-American team. They obviously have the Heisman, the returning Heisman Trophy winner in the quarterback, who is fantastic. They have who I think is the best player in college football, Will Anderson. So think about this. Their best 2 positions are quarterback and pass rusher. 2 most important things in modern day football. And then their next 2 sweep positions, they have an elite corner and elite safety. So it's pretty clear they got a guy who is going to pass rush the shit out of every team they play, and 2 DBs that can fly around and make plays nonstop, and then they have elite corner. And the one thing we always know with Alabama, they're going to have the skill guys. So I would expect, and a lot of people are picking Alabama to win the whole thing again this year. You would imagine Ohio State is going to be better this year on defense, so they should be in the mix. Georgia, going to be loaded again. It just, the shitty part about college football, it just feels like the same three teams again. Ohio State, Georgia, Bama. And I know that Michigan beat Ohio State last year, but probably a one-off. Let's just be real on that one. I just think it's insane. We are, like Coach K when he retired, like that's over. We're never seeing anything like that again. I mean, John Calipari think about him. Like he's probably the most famous. Even Tom Izzo. I love Tom Izzo. He's got one national championship. Coach K and Nick Saban, whenever Nick Saban decides to retire, like the longevity of a guy just going to win all these natties, consistently kick ass, is probably done. Like Kirby is a fantastic elite coach. There's a chance he just wins one national championship. Now you can say the talent he's getting, but the SEC is really hard. If you told me that in 5 years, Kirby has gone to a couple more national championships or playoffs, but he's only won one, I think it's believable. Now maybe he gets over the hump and wins another one. But the chances that he's winning 6 or 7, probably not happening. Probably not happening. So obviously Dabo has multiple, but you even see now it feels like they've been passed a little bit, and they're not even playing in that great of a conference. So it's the respect and just the admiration and just the impossibility. How Nick has done this is insane. Now obviously once they got so big, they just became a machine. And what I was told a long time ago is, in recruiting, you don't choose Alabama, they choose you. Now, obviously, there are a player or two that pick and choose, and that's why Nick's mad. Because in NIL, well, they do choose. Because it matters, the money impacts their decision. It's pissing Nick off. But he might rattle off one more national championship if all his guys stay healthy.